Then have a water. Yeah, I came in there, so they told me somewhere.
Now it's not easy.
We said 2 were late. Huh? Can we do the Mrs. Speaker? You have to do that.
Don't you have like an HDMI somewhere? Okay, I don't know.
What is it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Do you need an HDMI?
just came in.
Just do quickly then. That's why I said you have to come down here so that we start on time.
If you need IT help, IT person is there. This is the one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna move to this one. And HDMI. We don't have one. Done. Okay. Okay.
Good afternoon, Cape Town. Welcome to this week's briefing. I'm Minister of Electricity. My name is Wilson from GCIS. I'll be taking you through today's proceedings. This is the first time we're having a briefing of this nature in Cape Town, so a very warm welcome to you, Minister Rudy, and Demand Side Management, welcome. But without wasting any time, we have got media that is online also at the same time. The streaming link has been sent, and we are live, and over to you, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lizelle, and good afternoon to everyone, the media houses that have found time to join us, and just to thank you most profusely for being part of this conversation so that we get to transmit to the entire country the efforts that we are making to address a major problem that is confronting the country. Let me also just thank our principal partners in this work. Eskom Mancom is here. He has joined us from Eskom or from the demand side management. We have built a strong camaraderie relationship to ensure that our efforts are coordinated in the resolution of the most preeminent problem that's facing the country. And just to also thank my colleague Rudy for the exceptional work that he's doing at NICOM. That's the technical anchor of the Minister of Electricity. Of course, we do report to the President on a periodic basis on the work that we are doing. And also to thank private sector for their support, and I'll share with you the kind of support that they are giving to us. We did indicate that they will be very consistent in sharing with you an update in relation to the efforts we are making in addressing the challenges regarding the deficit of electricity supply in the country, namely load shedding. And of course, during the President's debate, vote number 1, we also had an opportunity to expand on the efforts that we are making. And these efforts really are broken into 3 parts. The first part is our winter plan. Of course, Eskom has done some modeling, generated scenarios on the, if you like, the optimistic case and also the middle case and the worst case scenario. So we're really trying to avert the worst case scenario and the approximate conditions of the best case scenario. And of course, we will share with you what is it that we're doing to avert the worst case scenario. Of course, we're talking the period that really started now in May, will continue until about August. So that's the first phase. So I call it surviving winter. Really, that's what we're trying to do. I'll share with you the efforts that the government is making, and then will be measured against the progress against such efforts. And then there's a medium-term intervention. So this is a period starting September, stretching all the way to April of next year. So there we working tirelessly to ensure that the load shedding is reduced to significant levels. If you like, in inverted commas, tolerable levels. Load shedding by definition is not tolerable, but I'm sure we all appreciate that stage 1 is not stage 6, but we want to eliminate all the stages. So that is our mandate to do exactly that. And then there's a long-term intervention, and the long-term interventions really is about energy sovereignty, and I'm talking the period April 2024 and beyond. So you need to read these interventions against that. So I will take you through what some of these interventions are. I'm not sure if colleagues are able to see the presentation, the slides. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I'll take you through what these interventions are. So we think that it's important that every time when we share with you the work we are doing, there's an appreciation that we are doing this work against the Energy Action Plan. I did say before that we are not authoring a new plan. We are working within the parameters of that plan, and of course there's going to be significant adjustments to those plans to make sure that we avert a crisis. So the first progress that we want to share with you is that 2 additional hybrid projects from the Risk Mitigation Independent Power Procurement Program have been approved by the Eskom board and will now proceed to legal close, and we project that these projects will reach close by the end of June this year, and they are going to add an additional 274 megawatts to the grid. So you can see that we remain within these efforts are within the time period that we have defined. And then I must indicate that we do have preparations underway to release an additional bid window. As you remember, we did make the point much earlier, I think in one of our previous media briefings, to say that we're accelerating the procurement events. So we're looking at the additional bid windows in June and July of 2023. And this will include bid window number 7 for wind and solar PV, just to announce and reaffirm our commitment to the decarbonization agenda. And for these bid windows, we are looking at 5,000 megawatts. We did say before that as a team, including NICOM, we are looking at the possibilities of a more aggressive window to ensure that we are able to canvass as many megawatts as possible from the renewable side. What is important here is that when we go to the next bid window, is to ensure that we match the prospects of these projects to be located geographically in the areas that they've got access to grid capacity. So you know that one of the major shortcomings of the previous bid window is about 3,000 megawatts or so that remains unallocated as a result of poor access or no access to grid capacity. So we'll make sure that there's no misstep there. And then the further bid windows for battery storage, 1,200 megawatts. This is important in the context of ensuring that we reach, if you like, approximate conditions of base load, because PV alone, without the backup or the support of storage capacity, is far removed from base load conditions. And then there's the gas project for 3,000 megawatts. And the RFP for the load shedding reduction program to the tune of 750 megawatts, and the cross-border procurement program of 1,000 megawatts. This program altogether procure in excess of 10,000 megawatts. So during the debate on the budget vote number 1, I did indicate on our forays into Mozambique when we were there on Monday with the minister in the presidency meeting my counterpart in Mozambique and Eskom equivalent in Mozambique, and a number of state players in the Mozambican energy ecosystem. They did indicate in the immediate we will be offered about 80 megawatts, and then in the next 6 months we'll get about 1,000 megawatts. So we're concluding that discussion with our counterparts Mozambique, so we're confident of getting that. But that is not accounted for here until we conclude those. The point I'm making is that as I speak to you, the 80 megawatt is possible. I also indicated that we're working with our experts here. Johannesburg City Power has indicated that they've got units that can give us 100 megawatts. Nelson Mandela has got a generator that can give us about 44 megawatts. It was mothballed in around 2010. So the technical team, I think today they are in those areas and examining what is possible, and will give you feedback. So the point I'm making is that even there's a potential of about 110 megawatts, which we have not accounted for here, because we really want to be very deliberate, precise, and absolute in what we are sharing with you. And then there's a tremendous amount of work that support that we are receiving from the business sector through the Resource Mobilization Fund. Remember, it was launched sometime ago. Ourselves, myself and Rudy, and the business fraternity is a 100 million rand facility that is meant to give us technical support to be embedded in the various power stations. I'll share with you what that is, but the point I'm making is that we will be engaging those technical experts, and they will be at their stations by the 5th of June this year. So I think it's Monday. They are starting to do that, including support that will be given to us on the open cycle gas turbine. I'll share with you what is the kind of support that we'll be getting there, so that we're a bit crisp and we're not all over the place. So it's not just support in general, it's very specific where we are going. And then there's issues around the fact that there's a significant interest that has been demonstrated or expressed on the back of Eskom's demand management program, and I'm sure Malcolm will share that with you. So we are confident that this program is going to be oversubscribed, fully subscribed. We will share with you what those elements are. Remember that we did say that there's huge potential that can be derived on the demand side, essentially throwing back the megawatts on the demand side without necessarily interrupting households' ability to meet their daily requirements, but just being smart about how we engage with the energy solutions so that they don't coincide with peak demand. So we're essentially flattening the curve, if you come to think of it. That's the point that we are trying to make. And then I'm happy to indicate that the Eskom has agreed to waive the requirement for security deposits to enable the wheeling of electricity to municipalities in good standing. So we think that this will significantly improve generation, because this was one major stumbling block. I think there's a number of megawatts that are stranded. The economy can't benefit from that as a result of challenges around wheeling. We're working with NICOM also on a broader framework on wheeling. Just now we're in a meeting of the PCC chaired by the President, where you have all spheres of government present here, and we're sharing with them the work that we're doing. Of course, we have been doing this work with local authorities, so we're making progress. I think for me this is one of the most telling and powerful, I think, weapons at our disposal to address the load shedding question, because it begins to incentivize, if you like, investments on the renewables, and of course there will be those arrangements between the producers and the potential off-takers. And the major stumbling block was access to the grid, and that has been resolved. And of course the issues around the Eskom debt relief bill was passed. The National Assembly is going to see concurrence NCOP. That is significant from the point of view of benefiting from those the incentives that or rather the ability for Eskom to invest, if you like, the additional space that is being created by this fiscal support, the issues around investment on the maintenance of the assets, the repurposing of the power stations, and also what is possible in relation to this distribution and transmission. So that's going to become possible as a result of that. So just to be a bit more explicit with regards to the technical support, so that there's a better appreciation of what we mean by this technical support, just to recap, I did say that there is a 100 million rand facility galvanized by private sector to work with us to help to resolve the energy problem. We have identified 4 stations, power stations, that will receive immediate attention. So the Matla, the target is to improve the energy availability factor by 11%. So you can see now we are trying to be measured and precise. So it's not just in general we want to improve the EAF. We are trying to illustrate to you that this progression of the aggregate EAF increasing to 60-65% over time, where are we getting this megawatts? So we're trying to illustrate to you, and then also say exactly what is the problem. For an example, in Matla, so it's issues around coal washing, the ash, slurry, and scrubbing. We'll go to grill. These pegs have got, if you like, generation units in total 2,800 megawatts. We think that we can make an improvement of 25%. We're reducing what we call partial load losses. So partial load means that the generators are working, but they are not working at the speed that they are designed for, as a result of, in this instance, the clogging of the cooling towers, because if they were to run it at their design capacity, the emissions level are going to be very high. So we need to make interventions with regards to cooling towers so that they can perform their function, and we're able to run these machines at the desired level. So that's what we're saying, Creed. So when we come back now, we're talking, like I said, station by station. So it's not in aggregate terms. And then Majuba, the PECs, they give us 3,822. We think that there's a possibility for us to get that an improvement of 12% in the EAF. And they were addressing the back filters, and we think that they will be able to reduce the partial load losses, and as a result of improved efficiency, we should be able to get 1,200 megawatts. And then Kendall, 25% EAF improvement will address the issues of mills, dust, ash handling, heaters, and denim water. And then we took a number of you who made time to join us when we went to Kusile. We were of the opinion that the work is done at the power stations, just to go and demonstrate to you that there is significant amount of work that is being done there. So there are 3 units that have been put out of operation as issues that have to do with the flue gas desulfurization, and as a result compromising the integrity of the 210-meter chimney. We haven't had the benefit of that. Each unit is about 800 megawatts. The 3 of them put together, it's about 2,400 megawatts. So we've given you progress. We are moving there. We are confident the first unit of the 3 will come on stream by late November, the other one early December, the other one late December. So all of them should be back by the 24th of December, and that's 2,400 megawatts. But we are working with some of these experts to provide additional support to our teams that are there at Kusile. So this is not a vote of no confidence. We are not casting any aspersions. So we thought that we need to give them additional capacity in relation to ensuring that we are able to implement this within the time frame that we had set for ourselves. So when we were in Kusile, we got the assurance that we are on track, but we want the team to go back just to give us additional assurance, and or to propose, if you like, steps that can be taken to even bring them earlier. But we'll stick to the additional initial time frames as the ones I've shared with you. And then there's an issue around the open cycle gas turbines. So Horika, they're connected by a pipe. I think that's not a major problem. The big problem comes at the Ankerleg. If you want to have them on load at the percentage that we want to have them, we are going to have a logistics problem. Of course, you know the storage capacity off-site is 40 million liters, on-site is 17 million liters. But what it means is that at the rate at which we'll be running them, you'll need about 100 trucks coming in. And if you want to ramp it up, logistically from the internal team, they were finding it difficult to find how best to accommodate additional So we have sent some of these experts who are very knowledgeable on logistics, and they'll help say to us what is possible. And then there's additional support to Newcom in relation to the support on the establishment of the one-stop shop. So we thought that we must be a bit deliberate in how we share this information with you. And then with regards to the winter plan, I did say, I mean, all of these things, what they mean is that we want to, so you'll ask the question, but you are making these interventions, of course, we see the gradual improvements on that, but you are not seeing the improvement in relation to the stages of load shedding. It's because of the winter condition. I mean, the demand has been ramped up. That's the point we are making. Once we transition into summer conditions, even at the current performance, you'll be able to see the bottom line. The bottom line is the stages of load shedding. But we are confident with those measures that I've shared with you, what will come beyond the winter period. The 3 units at Kusile, by the way, I also forgot Unit 5 at Kusile, which will be coming on stream by October. So essentially, the total what's coming out of Kusile is 3,200 megawatts. We want to bring down the issues of unplanned capacity loss factor. So the interventions, remember, Matlakril, those power stations I mentioned, the issues of addressing the ash dams and the cooling towers and the like, they will contribute to us reducing the breakdowns by about 15,000 megawatts at any given time. So of course our ambition is to go significantly lower than that, but we're sharing with you what is possible. And also the issues of the open cycle gas turbine, I did tell you what the issues are. The logistics issue, once we improve that, then it also gets to lift the amount of megawatts that are possible. And then there are interventions on reducing demands. Of course, we're working with municipalities, the big metros. We are initiating a program working with city, not initiating, supporting an existing program, I must add. City Power, they think they can claw back about 370 megawatts. The city of Cape Town will be doing the same. And then we'll be going to other metros. We're doing Buffalo and Nelson Mandela as part of our overall effort to ensure that there is a consistent supply to, amongst others, the original equipment manufacturers in the auto sector. I'm talking specifically about these interventions that are localized in Nelson Mandela and also in Buffalo municipality. So part of our demand, we think that in this period, there's a potential of 1,000 megawatts. Of course, savings. This is going to be expanded beyond just the winter period. That's the point I'm making. But we think in the short term, 1,000 megawatt is possible. So it's about setting inverters and batteries to charge from the grid during the night. So part of the problem that we have is a surge in demand when the lights come back after load shedding. So what people do, they consume what they consume, and simultaneously they charge the back, if you like, a solution. So we are asking them, don't charge it at that time. Charge it at night when demand is low, and then you are able to charge, and then you are able to have that benefit during load shedding or during the peak. That's the request we are making. So really, attitude thing. Don't charge when it comes back. Use what you can use, and then at night, please charge this backup solution. The issues around the electric at peak time to save energy and reduce. Of course, there's a benefit to the consumer. As I said before, geysers consume up to anything between 30 to 50% of energy consumption at the house level. So if you come to think of it, if you invest in solutions to reduce demand, especially focusing on the geysers, you will see that the grid is going to benefit on lower demand, but it's also likely going to translate in pocket, because you are going to be paying, of course, assuming that the billing is not estimate, is accurate. And then we thought as a team that it is important to consistently, and we're discussing this with Rudy, we mustn't get tired of conveying this message. And of course, there's a public narrative that there's a doomsday scenario, that the grid is about to collapse. So we hate many instances when people conduct their monologues, they make the point that there's a situation of grid collapse. We want to say that that is highly improbable. That's the point that we were making. And of course, we do accept that it is inherent in systems of this nature that you can have this catastrophic event, but it's extremely low given the kind of control measures that they exist in Eskom. And I must say that the possibility of a grid collapse, of course, under unforeseen circumstances, an earthquake, a major flood that really decimate your transmission grids, things like that. Those are the kind of things that can place us at the risk of a grid collapse. And I must emphasize that if you see stage 5, 6, doesn't mean that you are closer to a grid collapse. It simply gives the assurance that the system controller is in charge of the system. That's the point to be made. Is in charge of the system. And in fact, it should give you additional confidence. Of course, we don't want shedding. I'm just saying it's an instrument at the disposal of the system controller to make sure that we are able to balance supply and demand. So just if you see higher stages of load shedding, doesn't mean that I'm close to collapse. Simply means that the system operator is awake to make sure that we balance demand and supply. And like I said, we have said before, and thanks to our colleagues, Malcolm from Eskom, just sharing with the general public, there's multiple safeguards, about the 6 gates or so that exist. So we are confident about our ability not to get to that stage. And these systems, like I said, Eskom does test them regularly. So the point we're making that we are addressing that situation. And of course, our current focus remains on preventing a national blackout and ensuring essential service continuity during high stages of load shedding. Of course, quite apart from the court process, the appeal there, the work that we are doing now is to work with the various provincial governments to show us in Parade, just to we've already quantified, if like, at an aggregate level, what is the amount of money that is required to put in place various interventions. There are multiple permutations. There's a permutation just on if you like, generators. We have done what the numbers are. A big hospital, a small hospital, and also you compute in there what is the cost of diesel. We have also done computation if you just have PV on its own, what is the capital cost, PV plus battery energy storage solution, what you call BESS, what is the cost to that. So that is an appreciation of the cost. And I must say that in this regard, we have been engaging with multiple players, including the diplomatic community. We'll be announcing a major grant that the Chinese government and its people are making it available so that we are able to install in this multiple strategic installation, so that we don't get to a situation where we
course, from a public sector point of view, we have to ensure that measures are being taken in government buildings across the state sector over the next 12 months to reduce our demand. We still see a significant number of lights that are on, inefficient systems that are there. We need to ensure that the campaign is across Director Generals who are accounting authorities, ministers, state sector, everyone that is required to be able to reduce their demand over there. If we're able to introduce 10% saving, that's about 300 to 400 megawatts of saving from the government or state sector. This is going to be quite critical. Minister, that's just really the campaign that you're about to launch and the details of that. We're hoping that that messaging is able to get out to the general public, to industrial users, to households, why it's important for us to get back onto that energy saving campaign. The target is, let's try and save 1,000 megawatts as quickly as possible as a minimum. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm satisfied, Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, Rudy. Minister, I don't know if Malcolm is going to say anything, or is it just during the question time?
During the question time.
Okay. There you have it, colleagues. I think we will open up the floor for questions, but we will take from those colleagues who are on the floor at the moment. You can just raise your hands, and then we'll move over online. I see your hand waving behind there. Paul, you need to find a microphone. I'll give you the first stab at the question run. Anybody else on the floor in the meantime? Carol will be second. Paul, go ahead with the first question. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Paul Kgosientsho from Bloomberg. On Wednesday, the President mentioned the electricity security bill. Could the Minister please give us an idea of where this bill is, what it's about, and when does he think it'll come through to Parliament or Cabinet to approve it? Thank you.
I think the microphone was a little problematic. Carol? Yes, we did get it. Carol?
Thank you. Carol Payton from News 24. Just some points first of clarity. Minister, which projects from the RMI-BBB have reached, which additional projects have reached, are expected to reach close? I guess those are not the SCATEC ones, which are already done, or are they the SCATEC ones? But anyway, if you could just clarify that. And then I've heard about a twinning program that Eskom has with some of the kind of big industrial employers and operations. I don't know if that's a real thing. If you could just elaborate that. And then you talked about a technical team that was going around to these 4 power stations. Who is that technical team? And then I also didn't catch, what you said about how many million litres of diesel you'd ideally want. Thanks.
That looks like 2 hands, Minister. Over to you.
Well, I'll ask Rudy to go first. I think the Paul's question.
Paul, yes.
It derives from the omnibus bill, if you can take him through here.
Paul, you'll remember that what we used to report on before the Minister was appointed was on a whole set of interventions to smooth out the regulation, right? To make it much more easier for projects to be going through permitting and authorizations. Part of that process was while we've announced the red tape team and a one-stop shop, we thought that it would be necessary as part of what the President had requested us to do is to look at a bill that would do that. It's called an omnibus bill. It's still the omnibus bill. So, apologies for the confusion that this may have caused. We're not looking at an energy security bill in the sense of what you thought. You thought, hey, these guys are coming with something all new and funny. It was really about the regulatory approval systems to be able to ensure that we are able to streamline, if necessary, by developing a new set of legislation that is there. And that is support the one-stop shop that we're about to launch on dealing with red tape. And as you know, there are all sorts of different authorizations and permitting, from EIAs to land use policy, to registration, budget quotes, cost estimate letters, whole sets of them, depending on where you build your plant. These are areas that we're looking at. So for the confusion, it is about the omnibus bill that we used to report on before.
And the part of what was the omnibus bill is the one that has already gone through, which deals with the establishment of the various entities, the 3 entities of Eskom. So, Carol, on that, I'll give you the actual names of the projects. I don't have them now, but I'll make sure that I give them to you so that we are precise with the answer. We'll make that available to you and everyone on the call. And then on the training program, really it's about, some of them are people who had worked at Eskom before. Some of them are industry experts, so they might not have worked at Eskom before, but they come highly recommended. And through the process at NICOM, and also working with the private sector, these are people who raise their hands, they go through a process, will be very happy with the credentials of the individuals, but it's also specific to the area of expertise. So if you remember, I did indicate, for an example, if you go to, let's take any of these power stations that I've mentioned, when you go to Majuba, we're talking about the challenges with regards to the back filters. So we want someone who's got some experience in relation to that. So it's really bespoke to our interpretation and understanding of the problem. And how we get to pick up the problem is that we see the repetitive nature of this failure and its implications on the availability of megawatts on the grid. We isolate that and then we look for the kind of expertise that can help us to resolve that. So essentially we are drawing it from the pool that we have created over a period of time, and then they come to assist us in that way. And then in relation to the issues around diesel, remember I did say that, Carol, in the 18+% tariff increase that's NERSA approved for Eskom, they had built in their ring fence 8 billion of that was for the procurement of diesel. And in the 254 fiscal relief, I did say that the National Assembly has approved concurrence of NCOP. Eskom had the ring fence about 22 billion rands of that for diesel. You put them together, it's 30 billion rands. Now, what we're doing is, if we're to run this open cycle gas turbine and unload greater than what Eskom's projections were, remember that the rate at which we burn them, it's a function of the performance of other units. If these other units are not coming on stream, it means that we're going to run this almost like a base load. So we're doing that projection, but at the current figures, so if we're to continue at the rate at which we are doing, that 30 billion might not be sufficient. And then the next question you'll ask me about, Minister, what is that amount? We're working on what that is, so doing the modeling. And then the next question, if it's more, where will that come from? Of course, there are two, it can come from one of two places. It can come in a future tariff increase, or it can come directly from the fiscal. But if you come to think of it, ultimately it's the South African taxpayer who gets to pay. And then whether that is affordable or not, how we answer that question is, if we are able to save one stage of load shedding, and we juxtapose that number, what is the cost to the South African economy as a result of one stage of load shedding? So Carol, we will, once we finish that modeling, come back to you, because it's a public information really. And we did commit to you, and when I say you, I mean everyone, that will be transparent about those figures so that we get to be interrogated on that. So I'm not in a position to say whether 30 billion will be enough, but at the rate at which we are burning, if we are to continue throughout the calendar, it will not be sufficient. We'll tell you what is that number. And if we can't get that number, then it means that you must slow down this OCGT, and then of course there's a cost, and that cost is higher stages of load shedding.
Sorry, if I just wanted to know logistically, because the problem is the logistic one. So how many more million litres are you actually wanting to have on hand at the OCGT?
So I did say that the biggest problem is at Ankerleg. We've got 40 million on-site storage, storage capacity. We've got 17 million on-site storage capacity. The issue that they will be depleting this very quickly, so you need to be replenishing them. Horika, remember, is a pipe, so we will not have major problem. Ankerleg is road-based, and that's why I had said earlier on, in their modeling, they can accommodate about 100 trucks in a day, 24-hour cycle. So it's a logistics issue, really, how we get to address that. And of course, at the rate at which there are issues around where they berth, there's a terminology they use about we pay about 500 rands a day if the ship is just waiting to offload and it's not there on queue. And then there's also issues of contracting these trucks that must come here because they are with you almost 24 hours. There's a cost that's associated with that. So we're building all of these costs, and then we make them available so that when we make these decisions, they're informed decisions. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you very much, Minister and panel. I think, Minister, we will switch to online. We'll start with William Vaughan's questions from Network 24. Then we'll move over to Terence Creamer's 3 questions, and then Chris's questions from EE Business Intelligently asked 3 questions, and then the second round, there are more questions from the online grouping. So we'll start off with William Vaughan from News 24. The first question to the Minister, with NECOM discussing the potential shortening of the proposed contract with Car Powership, what has the Minister's experience with the company been when putting this proposal to them? Is this possible? Will it potentially have cost per kilowatt implications? Second questions from William to Rudy. What are NECOM's intentions with working with DMRE on potentially updating the RMI PPP if its preferred bidder Car Powership does not attain approval? Will the window for tenders be reopened to expedite acquisition of 1,220 megawatt from other producers on an emergency basis? His third question is to the Minister. What contingency plans, if any, are in place or being developed in case the court case to exempt thousands of institutions from load shedding ends in favor of the applicants? What will change in the scenario for South Africans as a whole? Then over to Terence Creamer. He asked 3 questions. He's from Engineering News. Please could you explain the significance of Eskom agreeing to waive the requirement for security deposits to wheel into municipalities in good standing? How much capacity do you estimate could be unlocked through this waiver? The second question is Engineering News. Did Eskom investigate the cost benefit of pursuing power buybacks from energy-intensive users over the next 3 months? If so, why was it found not to be a feasible option? And then his third question from Terence is, could the Minister please offer insight into how he sees his powers and how he intends to use them, especially as it seems most determinations in terms of the IRP, including the Eskom emergency procurement programs, have been made. Those questions are from William Vaughan and Terence Creamer. Thank you, Minister.
You can go first. Okay. No, that's fine. On the issue of Car Powership, we haven't had that conversation. But just to restate my position is that my definition of emergency is can't be more than 5 years. So we're standing on that position. Whoever we engage in can't be more than 5 years. Of course, that has got implications on the modeling or the tariff. The longer the period, the flatter the tariff structure is. I always make the point that the best measure of whether it's affordable or not is the cost of not having it. It means that you are going to be burning diesel. But I think that the cost of burning diesel is really an outlier. The other comparison is what is the cost with regards to bid window 1, bid window 2, bid window 3. And if it's favorable, it's something that is worth pursuing. And I did indicate that at every turn, we will make these things public. So it's not, we'll not be coming here just to announce. We'll share with you what is the duration and what is the tariff structure and what is the rationale. So we haven't had engagement, but I'm just saying that's how I enter that conversation. And on the duration, the period where I am is non-negotiable, can't be anything more than 5 years. I give you that assurance. And then I'm sure Rudy will come on the others. Just on the issues around the court ruling, I did indicate, of course, we're going through there's an appeal process. But all I'm saying is that if you come to think of it, hospitals, schools, clinics, and police stations, a lot of them are located in areas of concentrated consumption. They will be sharing that with a number of other users. When you come to think of it, there will be a high density of those in your major metropolitan areas. Like I said, those are areas of consumption, concentrated consumption. So what it means is that the system operator will not have the leverage to balance the system. That's what it means, because once we exempt them, for as long as they don't have a direct line, it means that everyone that feeds off that distribution infrastructure is also will not be load shared, and therefore the system operator's ability to maneuver and get the additional megawatts to be denied of users is diminished, and therefore you are really advocating for a system collapse. So that's something that will be ventilated in the courts. In the meantime, what are we doing? Like I said, there's about 73 hospitals that have been exempt. I think the National Department of Health had requested for about 230 or so of these hospitals to be exempt. 73, as I speak to you, are being exempt, and there's a further 43 that Eskom is looking at to exempt. So essentially, we have about 137 of these hospitals that are not yet exempt. Like I said, we did the modeling of what is required, and that modeling suggests that if you were to provide, of course, there are permutations, because it's a function of the demand from those hospitals. We categorize them small hospitals and big hospitals, and depending on the solutions that you are going to install, we have arrived at a figure. I mean, just to give you a sense, if you had to have a combination of PV and battery energy storage solutions for the 137 big hospitals, you need upwards of 10.1 billion rands. And remember, that number have not yet computed, if you like, the schools, the clinics, and the like. Of course, the number will continue to grow exponentially. And then we also juxtapose that number. It must be juxtaposed with the solution that you buy a generator, and then you also run the generator. So the cost of buying diesel at the current prices, I think, just shoots up, goes through the roof, and we're able to illustrate that the return on investments, if you had to go a combination of PV and the best solution, your return on investment is over a period of 3 years. So that's what we're doing ourselves. So just readying ourselves outside the court ruling on what is possible, and we're presenting to Cabinet what's possible. And then there's what you call SIP 28 that the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure is working on. In my previous life as a technocrat, we're leading that. So what Rudy referred to earlier on, the retrofitting of government buildings, we're going to start with the correctional centers in the country. So we're going to go out. We were meant to go out about a fortnight ago. I think there were issues that we are being ironed out with National Treasury. The GTEC is the one that is running that procurement process. So in terms of that, you go out to market. Is the market that puts up the upfront capital cost. It's not only savings on the energy rates around utilities, water, and waste. And then for that saving, of course, you get to share with the state on the savings as a result of that intervention. And then you get that benefit over a period of time. And the length of time is a function of the upfront capital cost that we have made. So that's what we are doing as government. And Rudy did indicate that just on government facilities, we think we can claw back close to 400 megawatts or so, whatever the figure is. But the point I'm making is that there are those efforts in government to address that. And then, okay, in relation to the powers, yes, I think it's one is 34.1. Yeah, subsection 1. So it's really about on the generation side, determining, if you like, the configuration of generation, that is that mix of generation, how that will be procured. Of course, I mean, the principal responsibility is the IRP process. It's already underway. So it simply means that we then get into the bandwagon. We lead that now because that assignment is given to us. But there are issues around the emergency procurement that once we said we sit with NICOM and finalize what is possible, we can make that determination on what is possible. Of course, the instrument to procure still remains the IPP office. The IPP office is not dismantled. The IPP office still continues. Of course, even under this new dispensation, still accounts to Minister Mantashe. But I think it's important for us to, and of course, the President did say that there has to be collaboration, and that's why we are working very, very closely. So we really don't see that separation. We simply see that it has brought a great deal of clarity. We've got original powers now. We can move with speed as we engage with the NICOM and the process at the NICOM level.
Thanks, Minister. So what does that mean, William? I think the Minister's clarified that quite excellently. What does it mean is that 34.1, the Minister has the right to determine power, and he still has that, and that's quite critical. So although, as I think there was an issue of whether some of those IRP 2019 areas of interventions have already been determined, the fact is that the Minister should on the basis of, let's just talk about the risk mitigation program that is right now, Minister has spoken and made it very clear. An emergency power intervention is not going to be more than 5 years. Now let's assume that the power ships that are there are able to find financial close, and that means getting authorizations, because that's a step that you have to do, right? If they do that, that proceeds. There's a negotiations at the Minister. Should they not, for instance, then of course there's a different conversation that would have to be had if they are able to get the authorizations and a whole sort of different things. And let's assume, for example, and again this is our assumptions, that those can't continue. The Minister has the power to determine, and that's why he says this, to determine whether it's an additional or new emergency round that is required. And that's precisely on the basis of the conditions that he said. So I think it's quite important for us to be able to understand it in that context. Terence, on the
the waiver. Eskom approved the waiver.
The deposits.
Yeah.
Terence, on the waiver, the security deposit waiver, this was quite important. It was largely, there were 2 examples, but the one specifically that we did was around Kuruleni. There was a particular set of projects, a 200 megawatt project. I won't mention the project developer, that needed to build and would have to dispatch the electrons across the project has been built in the Northern Cape and would have to dispatch it across the distribution network of Eskom all the way to Kuruleni. Kuruleni, basically said, well, we don't need to develop additional transformers and facilities to be able to do that. And then, of course, suddenly there was a conversation, well, we wanted to have, security deposits. Now, over and above that, Kuruleni also had a willing framework agreement. And part of that discussions with them was trying to, forego the security deposits, because that's suddenly a new condition that was set there. A bit of an intense conversation and discussions, and we were able to resolve it. So it's one of those criteria that I think we are able to get out of the way. It doesn't necessarily mean, Kuruleni, of course, as a metro, has a willing framework, so it makes it much more easier. They've got a costing, they know how much it's going to cost, they're able to know where the connection points are, makes it much more easier. I think it's just one area and criteria that prevents us from moving towards an adequate wheeling arrangement that is quite critical for us to be able to, as Minister says, to evacuate electrons across the different systems wherever it is being built, and that's the most important part. So it comes largely from our conversations between Eskom and Kuruleni distribution around a particular set of project, which was a 200 megawatt project and a huge investment out in the metro of Kuruleni going forward. Minister, I think that's...
Maybe just to say, for purpose of completeness, what are we doing on our part? Because Ekurhuleni as a metro is, if you like, a center of excellence. I'm talking about the capacity that they have, and I guess the same goes for
many metro municipalities. But you are going to find secondary municipalities and also much less affluent municipalities that don't have the technical ability to enter into very complex negotiations around the wheeling framework. So what we are doing as a team, we are putting together a technical capacity that is going to help these municipalities, and we want to transversalize, if there's such a way, to make it uniform across so that there's an appreciation and predictability in relation to issues around wheeling. We are engaging, of course, with the SALGA, but there's a process that has to be run through the NESA process. But for our bit, even before that process matures, is to have a technical ability available to the extent that there's a project developer that approaches us, wants to wheel, and there are issues with municipality X or Z, we are able to help that municipality to enter into those conversations even ahead of that framework being in place, because our interest is to make sure that we benefit from those electrons now. We really need as many as possible megawatts on the grid, and if there's such an opportunity, we will not miss on such. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister and Rudy. I think for the sake of just managing the questions, there are 8 questions coming up. We'll take Chris. Is it a follow-up, Paul?
Yeah, it's follow-up.
Okay, then you can go ahead with the follow-up.
Sorry about that. I just want to get it clear. So there's no such thing as the electricity security bill that the President mentioned, and everything will be in the new electricity amendment bill. Am I correct on that, or did I get it all wrong? Sorry.
It's something different that we're introducing.
Is it?
Yeah.
And when will that be introduced?
We're finalizing the process so that we can submit it through to Cabinet and of course into Parliament.
Great. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rudy. All right, so we'll start off with Chris Yelland from EE Business Intelligence. He asks 4 questions, and then once Chris's questions are dealt with, we will then take the rest of the questions and then hopefully close the briefing. Minister, Chris asks, please can you advise the latest thinking on car power ship? At the last briefing, you indicated a change to a 3 to 5 year contract period, not through a renegotiation with car power ship, but through a new transparent, open and competitive procurement process where other non-car power bidders would be able to bid. Is this still the thinking, or has there been any change in this particular thinking? Then his second question to the Minister as well, please can you elaborate on the additional possible 80 megawatt plus 1,000 megawatt from Mozambique? What technology would such power come from? His third question is as follows. I think he deleted one of the questions. Yeah. So his third question, then his last question, can you provide any indication when the draft IRP will be issued for public comment and thereafter issued to government's business, labour and community partners at NIDLAC? Let's deal with Chris's questions. Thank you, Minister. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris, for those questions. I did reiterate my position on what constitutes emergencies, so we're not going to deviate from that. It should not be more than 5 years. Rudy did indicate that the current procurement process is still undergoing the issues of negotiations and issues around approvals, to the extent that part of those negotiations can result in lowering or reducing that period to 5 years. I think that will be a welcomed development, because then you don't have to rerun a new process. Then you are able to truncate that process, for lack of better. In fact, you are not truncating it, you are closing it quicker. But to the extent that you are unable to find each other, as indicated with the new powers, then you can go out and say, make a determination that we need that emergency procurement, and then it will be on the terms as stated above, in relation to the time frame and all of that. The competitive bidding process, like all other tender processes, are required in the country, transparent, and will make this known to everyone. And Chris, on the additional 80 megawatt, I think it comes from the power ship already, that site. I think they've got the excess of 80 megawatts. We're going back there because they indicated there's a possibility of ramping that up, but what they guarantee is 80 megawatts, and then on the 1,000
I think it's a gas solution that they are proposing, and I think it's gas that they are proposing. And then with regards to the draft IRP, the comment, when is it going to go out? It's a conversation we want to have. I mean, we got the powers, we are engaging with the team that was working on the IRP, and one of the issues that we are raising there is how far is the process, because we really want to accelerate that process, but we want it to have credibility, even if it's going to go out. Of course, it must first go to cabinet as a draft before engagement. Of course, there are legislated other steps. Before we take it through those legislated steps, I think we need to familiarize ourselves with what its core argument is and how it arrives at the configuration of the energy sources, if this is consistent with the decarbonization agenda, if this is consistent with the reality that is facing us, if the timelines are realistic, the kind of mix that is proposing. So yes, I think once we finish that internal process really is just the ministry, NICOM, and the team that has been working on it, because we are not in any way suggesting that our arrival and the assignment of responsibilities suggests that there was no work that was being done. There was work done. All we want to do is to accelerate it, and Chris, we will make that available to you. I mean, the kind of question, the timelines, when, and those legislated steps, we will come back to you and advise on how we're going to manage the process of the IRP. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. I actually found Chris's other question, but Carol, your hand, is it a follow-up? Please take it.
No, it's new question. Although I didn't get the original answer on which projects are new for RMI Triple P. I don't think you said.
Stated projects.
It's just a stated. Okay.
Stated projects.
Okay, so
It's a 3 stated projects that they've been able to sign off. Okay.
Okay, and then can I ask my new questions? Minister, firstly, I mean, just on this car power ship length of contract, you're not, okay, if it goes ahead through the risk mitigation round, you won't necessarily have any influence on the length of the contract, will you? I mean, it could be 10 years. And even if you do your own emergency procurement and you set a term of, you're not in control of the procurement. The Minister of Energy is in control of the procurement. So how can you be sure that you won't deviate from the 5 years?
Well, I think I would have determined what constitutes an emergency, period. And really, if there's any conflict, that will be resolved inside cabinet. But I'm just saying that when you do that computation, it's just an acceptance that there's an energy deficit that requires us to get additional sources to close that gap. But you do accept that you have solutions over a period of time. And that's a combination in the main around renewables and battery storage. And we are able to illustrate that it takes on average, like I said, the point I had made previously, if you look at the previous 4, the bid windows 1 to 4, I think those ones, they give you a better indication. It takes about 18 months from request for proposal to financial close, and then another 24 months into construction. So really talking about 3.5 years, and we're hoping that it will be in areas of additional grid capacity. So the maximum really is 5 years, because you must say, I mean, let's say you give it 10 to 20 years period. Do you want to tell me that in that period you will not be able to find additional energy sources to close what essentially constitutes the deficit? And I must say that from my engagement with the ministers, my peers, we are not at odds on this one. An emergency is exactly that. And of course, I do also accept that it's going to come across costly compared to other solutions because of the nature of the solution that we are seeking. And I don't think that we have to burden the South African people with an inordinate bill going into the future. Essentially, we are committing future generation. I mean, almost like generational, if you come to think of it, because generation is 25 years. We are very close to that. I don't think that this generation will behave in a manner that undermines the ability of coming generations to be able to meet their demands. And I'm sure that they also want to be going greener and greener. Of course, accepting that still gas is 50 times cleaner than coal, but I'm sure they'll want to have it greener than what we are doing. We are dealing with an emergency. It's a, if you like, a stopgap measure. Of course, it comes at cost, but we don't want to overcommit ourselves as we search for other solutions and making sure that they come on stream as soon as possible.
Thank you, Minister. Carol, you mind just switching off your microphone? Okay, I've managed to find Chris's outstanding or last 2 questions, but we'll add it into the entire last round of questions. Chris's last 2 questions is as follows, Minister. If there are more than 5,000 megawatts of compliant bids in BW7, will additional projects be selected to make up what was not procured in BW6? Then his second question goes to Rudy. What progress is there in respect of a national feed in tariff framework for Eskom and municipalities for solar PV and battery storage? Then the next lot of questions, we'll start with Lamisa's question from News 24. She asks, for clarity, the grant from China, is that to install solar PV and battery storage for households? Then Gavin Whittles from Newsroom Africa asked Minister Ramokgopa, what are the details of the grant from China for power to strategic installations? Are you referring to hospitals, schools, etc., as per the court order which DPE is appealing? And then Gavin also asks another question. His second question from Newsroom Africa is, when does a NECOM project project the saving of 1,000 megawatts from demand management? When will this begin? And is NECOM able to say when it expects the reduction of load shedding by one stage to begin? Then the last set of questions is from Deneen Erasmus. She asks from Business Day, to the Minister, you briefly mentioned a grant from China. Could you please share more detail about this? The value of the grant, when will this be finalized, or has it already been finalized? And then obviously just to round off, the presentations will be sent through to the group after the briefing is concluded. Those are all the questions. Minister and panel, over to you.
Okay, and then I close. Yeah.
Thanks. So on the FID, Chris, yeah, as Minister had indicated, Ministers directing NECOM basically to work on a particular proposal around the feed-in tariff proposals. What we are able to do is provide a framework and a guide that eventually municipalities will adopt, because remember, feed-in tariff is where the distribution centers sit, and that's where they have to make that. We're in the process. There are quite a bit of technical teams working on this from a NECOM perspective. The Minister has also brought in a whole set of other individuals also to be able to work on this. It is in the process. We are busy finalizing it. We've just presented some of the key aspects. Minister has just presented that to the Presidential Coordinating Council that you referred to earlier. So we'll keep you appraised. I think it's going to be quite important for us as some of the immediate. The second question is, I mean, what we want from 1,000 megawatts is kind of like immediately. It's about the behavioral change that we want, right? So it's very difficult to say, we want it, if we could say we want it tomorrow, that's one stage of load shedding. But it's about the communication that we have to make towards citizens, towards households, towards industrial users, to commercial users about how we can save during peak time. And that's really the issue that we need to do. So you could do this quite quickly depending on how well you are able to support us in communicating that message to the public. Because I think this is really why we're appealing to you. It's how quick we can communicate through social media, through various fora, through various interventions, to be able to get that message across. And I think this is really what determines how quickly we can save. So the point is to save as quickly as possible. And it's minimum. So that's the most important thing. If we can get it in the next few weeks, I think it would be a massive improvement on the system and on the demand that's there. And that's really what we need to do at the end of the day. So this campaign will be ongoing. We will intensify it. Malcolm will be speaking out. Minister will be speaking out. DGs will be doing it. GCIs will be doing communications on this. Various forms of platforms, incentives that are being introduced. What we want to do is start saving 1,000 megawatts as a matter of today, Minister.
Maybe just to say to Chris's point, I mean, if the 5,000 is oversubscribed, so we get more than the call for 5,000, the question is, are you going to take the additional that is beyond 5,000 to compensate for the 3,000 that you are not able to procure? I'm sure it's a conversation we'll have. But where I am is that we need to get as many megawatts as possible. We've gone through a process, and of course we are not able to allocate the 3,000 megawatts because of grid capacity. And when you go through this bid window, I think the assumption was that that would have been allocated. So the long and short of it is that conversation we'll have internally and make that determination without misstepping in relation to what the law requires. On the issue of the China thing, maybe just to say, in one of my very first briefing, Nippon briefing, this one I indicated that I said with the diplomats of all the major Western countries in the country, and had a conversation with them and asked them the kind of assistance they can offer, and they said they'll come back to me, including the American ambassador, the Chinese ambassador. We sat with the German representatives, a number of them. The Chinese are the first ones to come back to us and say that we will be able to provide you with this kind of equipment. So it's PVs, issues around generators. They've requested the spec, and just to make sure that it's compatible with our own requirements. They've come back to us, and then they've written to us formally. We'll announce, they've given us what is the value of those assets. And then we will determine where they must be installed. So that call is not made by them, that call is made by us. Whether it's this school in this municipality, this province, or it's this hospital, so the team will do that. What we need to do on our part as a condition, once you accept it, this asset belongs to you, you'll look after the asset. Is there issues around the taxes when it lands here? Exempt us from the taxes because we're giving you a donation, so we can't be paying on top of that. So we can imagine it's an issue to be discussed with SARS, customs. I really don't foresee that there will be a problem. It's a grant someone is giving you, so you can't be taxing. I'm trying to help you. You came to me, you asked for assistance. I'm giving it to you. I've responded quicker than anyone. They were never in a competition, but they're the most brutally efficient people you can find. They've come back, no conditions. We are giving to you because we can see the suffering of the South African people. So it has to, the process in government, you don't just receive, you must write to receive and ask for permission to receive. So we are doing all of that. And then thanks, Rudy, you are right. The 1,000 megawatts, we see it as a minimum. Our ambition is to achieve more, but that's something that outside our control. It's a function of the response from the general public, and I think the amount of goodwill that we have received suggests that a lot of people will be committed to this. We are also deploying some of the most latest technology to help us to ensure that we are able to get as many people as possible. We are working a conversation with the government employee pension funds, just a facility to support their members in relation to intervention around solar. We are far advanced, we'll make those known to you. So the question is, when will load shedding end? I keep on saying, we will come to these briefings, we will tell you, these are the megawatts on stream. It's a function, of course, of new generation and what you do on the demand side. We'll keep on briefing you and saying, this is what is coming on stream, this is what is already on stream. We'll be reporting now going forward. Or if there's any responses on the demand side, are we seeing it on the grid, the kind of impact? We'll share that with yourselves. But once more, thank you very much for attending. This really means a lot. I think the kind of robust conversations, the questions that are being asked, I think we're asking them on behalf of the South African people, but we also take this opportunity to use your platform, your various media houses, to communicate with the South African people. And I want to say to everyone, we do understand their hardships. They are going through a very, very difficult period, especially during winter. A lot of people have lost their jobs, businesses are closing, farmers are finding it very difficult to produce, inordinate increase in the cost of production, the retail companies in relation to maintaining the cold chain, and the fact that this has got direct implications on the cost of living, and exponential increase in food price, prices, a significant amount of inflation, especially the poor are the ones who are devastated. So we do understand the anger, the misery, and the frustrations of the South African people. We are not sleeping on the job. We are doing everything possible. I'm more than confident that the country is going to see the aggregate of these efforts we are making. It's not easy to see them now because the demand is ramping up. But as a result of these efforts, we are still managing to remain at the levels where we are. They're still unacceptable. Load shedding by definition is unacceptable. We are doing everything possible. I want to repeat as I close that we will solve load shedding. I am more than confident that we'll do it. You will see it in the numbers, but we'll see it also in your lived experiences. But thank you, Christine, for facilitating. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. Just one last question that Chris managed to sneak in without me noticing. But his last question is, can you provide any indication when the draft IRP will be issued for public comment and thereafter issued to government? Oh no, we did ask that.
We did ask
Yes,
that.
we did. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Malcolm from Demand Side Management. Thank you, colleagues in Cape Town. Thank you, everybody online. I wish you a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Thanks, Malcolm. Thank you.
Hello.
Chris asked so many questions that I got lost.
Yeah, can we?